Thank you, Sandy, for meeting this afternoon. So just want to spend a wee bit of time also speaking to you so that the judo membership get to know you a wee bit better as well. Congratulations on your vice chair appointment to the board. That's following about 3 years, I think, on the board for you.
Yep.
So I know you've had involvement with judo for quite a while now. Previously as partnership manager with Sport Scotland in conjunction with the sport. So tell us a wee bit about what it's been like changing from that role into board director role.
It's been good. It's been nice to work on the opposite side of the fence after my role in Sport Scotland. That was probably one of the driving forces that encouraged me to make the jump and put myself forward for that board position. As you mentioned, I was partnership manager with JudoScotland in my previous role at Sport Scotland, and that was a period that was quite challenging for the sport, quite challenging for judo. There was a lot of changes around development audits and governance and some challenges. So one of the reasons I wanted to put myself forward was I thought I could help. I thought I could be part of the solution and help evolve the organisation. So that was one of the main factors, and it's been a great journey ever since, continually making progress. Sport going from strength to strength, so it's been excellent.
And that's really interesting, just knowing that you've kind of had that involvement in sport. And I guess a lot of people would want to know why judo? So you've been involved obviously in your previous role with lots of different sports, and what made you want to be involved with judo?
Yeah, so there's probably three main aspects that made me interested in getting involved in judo. My background in sport administration, and come on to that later. The sport high kind of came through, and some other sports that I've worked with. But for me, I wanted to be part of the solution. I thought I could help. I thought I could bring a skill set coming from quite a diverse background in sport administration, and a skill set that I thought could be useful in the board of judo. Second to that was around ambition and where the sport wanted to go. I think we're scratching the surface, if I'm honest, around where judo could go. We talk openly in our strategy around meeting that membership target of 10,000. I think that's just step one. I think once we get to 10,000, I think we can go further and higher than that. So in terms of my ambition and what I wanted to achieve as a director and how I wanted to support, I thought there was an alignment there. I think the headroom for growth in judo is phenomenal. I think the sport can absolutely evolve into bigger and better things. That I want to be part of that journey. I want to play my part in that. And probably the last part in that is, I think I'm not a technically judo person, but I think the judo moral code, I think, is something that stands out from, if you take it through a Sport Scotland lens. The national agency invests in 52 different governing bodies. I think 51 other governing bodies look at judo and look at the judo moral code and think they're envious around those values, morals and principles, and not only the values, morals and principles, but how they are administered and how they're held to account within the sport. I think that's something that really perked my interest and still does to this day. I think there's a lot that other sports could learn around the judo moral code. So that's probably the three areas that excited me and encouraged me to put myself forward.
Yeah, and we're very lucky to have you. It's great. When I started at judo, that's almost 4 years ago, we didn't have any independent directors on the board, and having that skill set is so important. I think the way that sport is delivered and managed has changed quite significantly in the time that I've been involved in sport, over maybe 20 years or so. It's much more, it's the skill set and the diversity that we require to be able to operate as a business, and the governance structures are remarkably different from over those last couple of decades. I guess you've experienced that as well, and how we've kind of transformed through that. And I can see a huge difference, bringing a difference in variations of skill sets of people together. I like to think that the board all work really well because we've got people that have different careers and bring different skill sets that contribute to really great discussions and challenge at an appropriate level. But it would be quite interesting to hear how you feel about that from your side as well.
having come from the background I have, which is a lot around governance, so my time in Sports Scotland, I've done a lot around workforce, I've done a lot around local national partners, and particularly working around governing bodies as partnership manager, a lot of it was around governance and development. So I'm very much an advocate of independent directors. I think they're crucial. I think any highly functioning board should have a minimum of 25% of board independent. I think they bring that different skill set, that different lens, that check and challenge. I think sometimes that 75% of the board absolutely should be judo people and immersed in the sport and have a real rich history, heritage, knowledge, understanding of the sport. I think sometimes it can be too close to the sport as well, and I think it's good to have that different skill set that can just hold people to account and hold the organisation to account. And I also think we're in an increasingly difficult sporting environment. The environment is continually changing, and you need a different skill set and different expertise at different given times. So having the ability to bring independent directors on gives you the ability to flex and respond to the environments around you and bring in the types of people and the types of skill set that you need to add to the board. Second point I would make on that one is it's all good and well having independent boards, but it's listening, involving, supporting and absorbing and making independent directors feel part of the board is another thing. And that's the bit that's impressed me most about judo. I've never, sometimes I've got to remind myself I'm an independent director, because you just get your sleeves rolled up and you get involved as a director. And you're never made to feel like an independent director. You're never made to feel like a non-judo person, as sometimes I refer to myself. So we're very much a united board. We're all one voice. We've got independent, we've got different people, different skill sets, and different personality, different characters in there, which is great, which is what you need for a highly functioning board. But ultimately, when push comes to shove, we're all one, whether you're independent or not. And that's been hugely impressive. And it's a compliment to the way Mark leads the board, that naturally that culture comes from the top, but also from the rest of the directors, how they have just seamlessly been welcomed, certainly me and other independent directors into the fold.
That's certainly how I feel as well. And I see it very much as a team. I think the board works really well together. I guess maybe the membership itself don't necessarily get to see those inner workings of how the board operates. So I do think we've got a job to do in how we communicate that and share all the great work that the board does. And I guess it might be good to explore a wee bit of what do you see the biggest challenges ahead for Judo Scotland as the organisation?
I think just now the environment, I mentioned earlier on, the environment that we're in just now, cost of living, the cost of sport, the biggest threat I think to judo and sport in general is it becomes a middle class activity that families have to then choose whether they get involved in sport or not. I think sport should be fundamental to every family, every household should be involved in sport. And again, I've got 2 children myself and immersed in sport. I always wanted to be involved in sport. And I think everybody should do the same. And when you look at what judo brings that other sport don't, the moral code and the life lessons and the life skills, that's what I think is attractive to young people getting into sport. So I think we need to protect that at all costs, and we need to make sure this sport is as accessible as possible. And I think judo is. I think when you look at membership fees, we've as a board, we've done our best to keep them low, try to reduce the barriers. But I still think we can do more. I still think when you look at the demographic of the membership, we're nowhere near don't have equality around gender, for example. I think there's other, look at the steps that we've made in terms of para-judo, which I think is great, but there's miles and piles that we can still do. So I think the number one issue challenge for me is definitely cost of living. But it's also ensuring that all the barriers to judo are reduced as much as possible, and it's everybody's sport. And the clues in our strategic title around Judo for All, that does exactly what it says in the tin, and we need to make sure that absolutely is the case.
Yeah, and as you say, I think we have made huge strides forward in lots of these areas, but I guess one of the really exciting things about being involved in a governing body is around development. Your work's never done. There's no finish line on that. You could just keep striving for more and more. A lot of work just now being done around 3 Steps Safe and how we can set ourselves slightly different from other sports in that regard as well, about promoting the sport through 3 Steps Safe, that guarantee that clubs are meeting requirements that ensure safe, positive environments for children to come through as well. So, yeah, have you got any sort of thoughts on how you see that progressing as well?
I think it's really exciting. I think it's something that as a board we're definitely embracing and also we're influencing as well. It's nice to see Home Nations and British Judo all working together, working collectively. I think, again, from my previous role, I think that was something that I always looked on as being healthy, that strength in Home Nations and British Judo. I think that it can always evolve and can always get better in terms of that relationship, but definitely 3 steps safe. The well-being, welfare, safety of the sport, absolutely paramount, and that collective coming together of Home Nations and British Judo to ensure that happens. I think it can only be good. It's imperative importance that we make sport as accessible but also as safe as possible.
Right. And you mentioned about your previous role with Sport Scotland, but we haven't really touched on what you're doing now and how your work complements possibly your director role here and how they work in conjunction with each other. So do you want to tell us a wee bit about your current roles?
Yeah, so my current role, I'm the Chief Executive of the Scottish Football Partnership Trust, which is a national football charity which we do a lot of work around infrastructure, facilities, developing the grassroots game. And we also do a lot of programme support around reducing barriers and making sure that grassroots community football is as accessible as possible. So we invest in everything from new pitches, 3G artificial pitches, through with floodlit, to natural grass pitches, to changing room conversions, to new build changing rooms, to safety perimeter fencing, CCTVs. We distributes defibrillators to community clubs to protect and support our community. So we do a lot of work around infrastructure and development, but then we also provide seed funding and programme investment to ensure that people from families or areas of deprivation or suffering from financial hardship are given accessibility and the opportunity to ultimately play football. So there's definitely a connection there around being involved in the sporting environment. Prior to that, I've been involved in sport administration all my life. I played 13 years as a professional footballer and football player in this country. That was my sport. That's where I came through wanting to do and wanting to be. I would describe myself as a kind of championship player. I didn't quite reach the heights of regular Premier League football, but I'd really enjoyed the time within that. And I wanted to stay in sport. I wanted to transition into a further career in sport. So parallel to my playing career, I studied sport and exercise science. Moved into the sports science side of professional game and also academy football. But I got to that stage in my career where I didn't really want to be pigeonholed as the football guy. So that's when I kind of wanted to experience a bit more broad sport development. I went to local authority and then into the national agency at Sport Scotland. So working around workforce, working around local and national partners, working other government bodies. One thing that I always found really curious from a football point of view was when you looked at where Scottish football sat on the map, and obviously we're still in the giddy heights of the men's A squad qualifying for the World Cup and football in the country being on a high, but it's not always been the case. And when you looked at where football was on that world stage, what I found really curious was how come judo and swimming and bowls and curling and other sports and other governing bodies within the same country, that the same population, how can they be so successful on the world stage, and what can football learn from these other governing bodies and sports? So that was really the driving force of being a wee bit curious and wanted to get involved in other sports. To then, I always had in my head that I would like to go back to football and take that knowledge and understanding and take that from other sports that could help develop and evolve football, and likewise bring what football do really well to a lot of good things as well into other sports and into other organisations. So
yeah, it's great to hear that, because I find, like, obviously having worked in different sports as well, predominantly within Scottish curling previously, one of the things that's quite interesting is just it's a lot of the challenges are just the same challenges, just a different sport. It's a lot of the same skill sets that you need to bring. You just basically pick this one and move to the next. And I think that part of my role, I'm always finding ideas or checking in with some of the other CEOs from other sports. I think that there's just so much great work going on across sport in general, but there's no point reinventing the wheel with a lot of things. And yeah, I think we've really tried, I've been in post as well, to try and encourage as much networking as we can. And we're always learning from different sports. Because currently doing quite a bit. As you know, we had Scottish Gymnastics CEO in recently speaking to the board around some work they're doing around club standards, because you hear little snippets and think, oh, that could apply really well within the sport too. So kind of thinking about the future, and we'll be moving into our next strategic cycle planning fairly soon. Any thoughts on where that might go, or
I think lots of thoughts, but ultimately what is more important for me is not necessarily what comes out the back end in terms of the strategy and how that looks and how that feels. It's the process that we follow to get there. At the minute, it's been widely communicated that we've got record high membership at the minute, which is great. So let's use that record high membership to engage with them, to involve them, to get them involved, to hear their voices, hear their opinions, hear where they think their sport should be going, and how do we then take the decisions to support and ensure that is the case. So that's the bit that gets my juices flowing and excites me, is the process that we're about to embark on, and the people that we'll meet and listen to and understand and hear from and take guidance from. I think it's really exciting. And then it's always a start of a new cycle, and it's a start of an evolution. It's another phase. It's another way to build the sport, evolve the sport, and so it's hugely exciting. Not least forgetting we've got a major Commonwealth Games to get to before we even look at that new strategy, or certainly get to the finer ends of tuning the strategy. So it's hugely exciting, and I'm excited to engage and listen to people around and within the judo community to see where they think the sport should be taken. I think we've all got our own opinions. We've got a general view of where sport needs to go in this country, and how we continue with athlete success, how we continue to grow the membership, how we continue to strive for corporate excellence and make sure the organisation as a whole is the best it can be, and how we've got the right skill set and the right people, the right staff team, and the energy and enthusiasm that we need as an organisation. And so there's lots to build on, and there's lots of new challenges around there as well. And we've talked about AI and the influence AI is having in every other sector, and sports no different. How do we embrace AI, and how do we involve AI and maximise that within our sport? So it's hugely exciting, but the engaging with the membership for me is about that most looking forward.
Yeah, and obviously now as Vice Chair, do you see that being looking different from your role as a director? How do you think that will look and feel?
I think there's definitely a bit more responsibility that you take on with that role, but I go back to the point we made earlier. I think as a board, we're definitely as one, and everybody shoulders responsibility and high lean on expertise of others the same way as I'd like to be lean on the expertise of me. So I don't see the role changing a huge amount, other than a bit more communication from the chair and a bit more phone calls being fielded from the chair, which I think was always part of the course. He loves an 8 o'clock phone call in the morning. Apart from that, I see it as a continuation of the role, an evolution of the role I was doing before.
Yeah, well, it's great. I just think it's really exciting time, and as you say, moving into 2026. A lot of when I first came into the sport, people all talk about 2014 judo, 13 medals at the games, contributing to those 51 medals, the highest number of medals achieved by a sport held by judo. Just phenomenal games at home then, and to have the games in Glasgow, really exciting. And I was at the Commonwealth Games Assembly a couple of weeks ago and just felt so proud actually to be Scottish. It was a wee bit of a reflection on where external to Judo Scotland, how much work has gone into Glasgow hosting that game. So between Commonwealth Games Scotland and Commonwealth Sport, putting together a different model to make sure that the games could happen. But not only that, now to see that India has been awarded the games for 2030, that the change in the model of that has really probably future-proofed the games as well for the future. So really exciting time for judo as we move into that, and not least with the transition of the programme, the performance programme this year as well. So yeah, lots to look forward to, I guess. And
I think the word you use there, pride, I think that's right. I think the fact that it's been turned around so quickly as a small country of population 5.5 million, I think that's credit to us as a country that we can do that. I think also as a governing body, Judo Scotland because we are run so well as a government body, I've been in a position to be able to pivot and flex and adapt and absorb what is a phenomenal opportunity for our athletes on the world stage. So it's credit to everybody that we're in the position where we are now. Now it's just about maximising the potential and the opportunity that it gives us, and also maximising the bounce thereafter after the games, the increased spotlight in the sport, the additional young boys and girls that want to get involved in the sport, how we make that open and accessible to them. How do the clubs benefit from that? How do we support clubs to be in a position to maximise that? It's hugely exciting.
And we talk a lot about something we've been talking about as a staff team about legacy. I think people jump straight away to legacy to thinking about opportunities for people to get involved in the sport that maybe haven't. But I'd like to put a different twist on some of that, about how we encourage clubs and ourselves to think about maximising opportunities to really future-proof the sport. Like, how do we make sure that clubs have sustainable systems in place in terms of, you know, their leadership and bringing young people through to those positions too. You know, thinking about what we want as an organisation for the future and how can we maximise that potential. So, yeah, lots to think about as we move into 2026. I guess the final thing from me is, I guess as CEO of the organisation, my responsibility is really around the staff team, but I feel so privileged and lucky to work with such a great board. But from your point of view, how do we try to maintain that alignment between the board and the staff, and where do you think that sits at the moment, and how do you see that?
I think it sits in a good place right now. I've seen and I've been involved in my previous role as well, seen the evolution of the board. I think, in my experience, not just judo, but across a number of government bodies, the real risk of a board is they become too operational and they get too involved in the day-to-day running of the organisation. And I think we are hugely fortunate that we have good leadership at board level that ensures that if, as a board, we do get into the weeds, that we're pulled out there pretty quickly. And we have a great staff team led by yourself that on the day job and empowered and are making great inroads and strides in the sport, that allows the board to focus on the strategic piece of work that we need to focus on and leave the operational delivery, the day-to-day workings of the organisation to the staff, and we need to make sure that we don't blur those lines. I think that's the risk. And I've seen it in my previous role to Scotland, where a number of boards that I worked with, you would see them dropping down into that operational piece of work, and that's not a healthy place to be. It brings all sorts of challenges and issues, so that the board absolutely need to have a helicopter view. They need to be 10,000 feet in the air, looking at the bigger picture, looking at the strategic direction of the organisation, looking at the risks, looking at the governance, looking at the policies, and allow the staff to be empowered and motivated and inspired to go and make the biggest impact they can in the day job. And I think we are in a good place, but it's something you can't take your eye off, because the minute you do take your eye off and you think you've got a crack, then something comes back to bite in the backside, and we'll ensure that doesn't happen. But I think as we continually evolve the board, it's important that we reinforce those messages, that there is a line that we can't cross, and we're actually doing a really interesting piece of work just now that more information will be drip fed out to the membership in due course around how we align the portfolios of the board to the ways of working, and even the process that we've followed internally to consult, and the direction of travel that we're going in is very much strategic led and not necessarily around the traditional portfolio of a board director, and that's very, very we've done that on purpose, and it's been thought through and it's been thorough to ensure that the directors do not get down into the weeds or into the operational detail. So it's hugely exciting, and it's an area that we'll continue to strive at. But I think if I was to assess where we're at, I think we're doing really well. We're a 7 out of 10, but we can get better.
Really? Oh, great. And I feel very supported by the board, as I think all the staff do as well. And I think that's a really important part. You need to work as a team. It's one of the first things that Mark said to me when I was first appointed is, we are a team, we'll work together. And I think, it's okay to have differences of opinions. I think, within the board, we have differences of opinions at times, and as a staff team, we'll have differences, but that's what actually makes you stronger. And I'd like to think we're in a good position as well, but room for improvement too. And delighted to have you in as Vice Chair now, and be the first person up on our board director interviews as well to sort of try to give the membership a little bit more insight into the goings on. So thank you
Thank you.
for spending that time with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.